We're here for some site acquisition training with FMHC. In particular, I sort of catered this for Verizon Wireless just because that's a project most of us are working on. We could do some quick introductions. I'm JT Alcazar, I'm manager for Verizon. Go ahead, Sean.
Sean, project manager for Verizon Wireless.
Rob Newberry.
Rob, you're new, or
Yeah.
you've been around for like a month, or?
Yeah, about a month. I've been over at Nextel, so
Okay, you're working with. Are you at Nextel? Or you're doing site acquisition for them?
doing the file audit, so I'm kind of getting into the site ag side of things. So
Okay. Okay. What type of background did you come from?
I was a field service technician for T-Mobile.
Okay, great. Okay, Susan.
Susan Bourgeois on the Verizon project as well.
John Branfield, Verizon.
Wayne Bishop, Verizon.
Wayne does construction management for Verizon.
Andrew Yoplin, relatively new, Verizon, I think.
What type of background do you have, Andrew?
Law degree, real estate.
You passed the bar?
Yes.
Oh, congratulations. Karen?
I'm Karen, I'm literate. This is my first day. I think I'm on the Rotary right now.
Sure, yeah. Wherever we can use you guys. And what's your background?
Law,
You're,
law degree.
you passed the bar also? Congrats.
Ty Howard, Verizon.
Okay. Okay, that's introduction. Basically, site acquisition. What's the main purpose of what we're doing today? Obviously, whoever your client is, whether it's Nextel, US Cellular, T-Mobile, Verizon, the object of site acquisition is to acquire a site for the carrier, the client, in order to install antennas in that area. If you're driving down the highway and you notice you drop a call, if you lose connection with whoever you're talking to, chances are there's a weak link in that coverage map. Whether it be they're up to capacity with their existing sites, meaning a set of antennas is totally full and the handoff can't go to the next switch, or it's just a bad coverage area, there's no antennas in that area. At the end of the day, our goal is to look at a defined area that will be pointed out to you. You'll be directed to go into this ring, and it could be anywhere between 1/8 of a mile, 1/4 of a mile circumference, and to find a place to put the antennas for the client. Usually these antennas consist of 6 to 12 antennas elevated above the ground, anywhere from 50 to 150 feet in the air. Let's talk about the preliminary, and usually this is done, once you get your assignment, usually we come back with candidates within 2 weeks. So when you're assigned a search ring, a search area to look for, usually we have to have all candidates submitted in 2 weeks. These are called blue books or skips. With that being said, let's go to the preliminary research section of the outline. When you get a search ring, you have to prepare yourself for driving that area. And you have to be familiar with what the zoning and building permit atmosphere is of that search area. The first thing you got to do, and if you open your book here, your blue book, to the second page, you'll see what's called a search ring submittal form. That search ring submittal form identifies certain requirements that you have to follow when you're looking for a ring. For this particular search ring, there's a lot of information here, and to be honest with you, not a lot of it is really applicable to what you need to do. But what I'd be looking for here are 2 or 3 things. One would be the search ring center coordinates. That's latitude and longitude, which is 3/4 of the page down. That would be important to me. The second most important thing would be right underneath that. It says antenna center line height, AGL. You have AGL and AMSL. AGL is just above ground level, meaning how high above the ground do these antennas have to be. If right next to you is a hill, 100 feet above that hill versus 100 feet below the valley, you're going to have a height difference in coverage. So they also look at what's called the AMSL, which is the above mean sea level. They combine both of those for a total height for mounting. Okay. So the first thing you want to do is you want to take this search ring. You're going to get assigned this ring along with a map. If you look at the second page, or the page afterwards, I'm sorry, the next 2 pages, you'll notice 2 pages of information followed by a map. That map is what we call a search ring, or if you look on the outline, 2A, it's called a search ring area, a search area map, or a SAM. What you're going to experience in site acquisition is you're going to have a lot of acronyms, and you'll get the hang of it eventually. But people call it, depending on which client you are working for, they call it. There's different names for everything. For purposes of Verizon, I think they call it a search ring pretty much. Your search ring could be either a ring, an octagon, a pentagon, whatever different shape it is. That's the area you want to search. So what you would normally do, you see here that there are 2 locations that they are searching in this site. One is denoted by what looks like a square, and the other one is an odd-shaped property. This happens to fall in a valley, which is a difficult search ring area. But they're looking in 2 areas. You could find, when they identify 2 areas like this, they'll take one candidate in any of these 2 areas because they know that it's a very, very difficult search ring area. This happens to be in the downtown area of Algonquin. Okay? So you get your search ring, you find out how high above ground level and above mean sea level they want to be. You have your latitude and longitude, you got a center point, and you know how far outside of that center point they want to go. If they go further than the outside boundaries of that search ring, chances are you might run into another set of antennas that they already own. So now that, and they can't have that. So let's say they're looking somewhere here, and there's already antennas here. If you keep going out this way, it's too close to this one for it to be effective. That's how come they want you to stay in the search ring. So you have your search ring, you've got your search map. First thing you want to do is you want to prepare your maps, prepare where you're going to drive. You just don't want to drive out to the center of the ring and start looking around. You want to prepare your maps. You want to do, we have a mapping program on all the laptops called Street Atlas. And if you don't know how to use it, you can talk to your PM about it. And you basically want to mirror the search ring. You want your own set of maps that you're used to that actually have the street names on it, so you can see where you're driving and kind of plan this out. And you want different magnifications. You want something far out so you can see all the major expressways, to zoomed in, because if you're in downtown Algonquin, there's a bunch of little streets you might get lost in, and it's a lot easier if you have a couple of maps with you. The next thing you want to do while you're still here at the office with your search ring before you drive is you want to do a preliminary zoning analysis. Okay? Does your site require zoning? You're going to look at what jurisdiction it falls under. You want to see what jurisdiction it falls under. You can check online, do a Google search for Algonquin zoning maps online. You want to look at the map. You want to see, also want to view the ordinances, the maps online. You want to check, we have a zoning file in the back here, in the black cabinet that has a bunch of zoning ordinances already filed. And the idea is to determine what the atmosphere is of the area you're searching. I.e., is it mostly residential? Downtown Algonquin, or maybe like a lot $1 million homes, like up in North Korea that Sean's searching. There's $1 million homes. They want to put a cell tower up there because they're getting a lot of complaints. Chances are you're going to have a hard time putting antennas anywhere near there. But in Sean's situation for North Korea, $1 million homes with one spot that's zone permitted use. That's where that tower's going, and you got everyone upset because they just spent $1 million on their home, and now this big metal tower's going up right next to them. Hey, it's permitted. That's where we're going. So you kind of want to get the feel before you drive out there. If you can get a zoning map and see, oh look, mine's mostly commercial, or ideally, you'd have a manufacturing or warehouse district. Manufacturing or warehouse district is usually the preferred location of antenna cell towers and antennas because it's manufacturing, it's warehouse. It's not as aesthetically pleasing as residential areas. So now you have, you've done your preliminary research, you know what the zoning atmosphere is, and if you don't have that information online or you don't have it here, maybe the first place you want to go is to the jurisdiction and ask them, hey, do you have zoning maps? Do you have zoning ordinance? Do you have a telecom ordinance? Which is also in the blue book section of this outline. But you want to be fully informed, or somewhat informed, not fully informed, before you drive the ring. Now you're driving the ring. You got all your maps, you're ready to go. You're out there. You're at the intersection of Fullerton and Clark, downtown Chicago. You're looking for a site at Fullerton and Clark. What are you looking for? Well, the first thing you want to do is, how tall do I want to go? Let's say this was a search ring for Fullerton and Clark. Going back to this, they want to be, if you look at the second page, 100 to 150 feet in the air. So you know that your antennas have to be 100 to 150 feet in the air. So you want to look for all existing structures that meet that criteria. So if you get to that intersection and you're looking around and you see a couple of tall buildings that are 100 feet, 150 feet, that's great. That saves the client money of having to build a new tower. That saves you the trouble of having to zone a new tower where you have a public hearing in front of constituents of the mayor, you know, and you don't have to deal with all the politics involved there. So great, you have existing structures. Some of them include building rooftops, water towers, existing cell towers, and in some cases, ComEd high-tension tower lines, depending on the client, you know, if they do deals on high-tension tower lines, because in certain situations, some carriers like NIPSCO, ComEd now, do deals on their towers because their towers are everywhere. You know, if they could throw some antennas up there and collect $1,500 a month, you know, it helps their bottom line. So you're looking for anything tall where you can mount antennas. And if you're new to this, take pictures of it, get some information on it, and ask your PM project manager, you know, on their thoughts of it. The second thing you're looking for when you drive the ring, under site qualification, is you're looking for raw land candidates. In some jurisdictions, they call them greenfield candidates, raw land or greenfield. That just means raw land, and don't think like raw land is dirt and weeds. It could be dirt, weeds, it could be a forest area, they'll clear trees to build a tower. It could be the parking lot of a school. It could be anything where there's no structure. They'll dig into that, they'll clear whatever they have to do to build a tower if you get a deal done. So by raw land or greenfield, they just mean an area where there's no buildings or existing structures. And usually you want to talk to your, depending on the project, you want to find out how big of a lease area they want to get. Usually carriers like to get 100 by 100 feet or 110 by 100 feet. As much area as possible, even though they're going to take up 1/5 of that space, because they like to have other tenants go on their towers that they build and collect more income to help offset the costs of building the tower. And also, you know, they get additional rent for the ground space, for their equipment. Where's the equipment going to go? Where's the antennas going to go? The antennas are going to go in a tower, which, let's say Verizon will collect the rent. And if they can get more ground space, they will sublease the space to other carriers and collect that rent also, so they're getting 2 additional rents. In other situations, if you have a savvy landlord, they're going to say, no way, you get as much space as you need for your equipment in your tower. If someone new comes here, you collect the rent for your tower, they'll come to me if they want more ground space. Those are more savvy landlords. Okay, so now you've driven the ring, you've found one existing rooftop that meets 100 to 150 feet, and you found a water tower, and you found a raw land, all within the search ring area. Great. Now you've got 3 potential candidates. What do you do next? You do what's called, well, now you do what's called a blue book. Blue book is also known as a SCIP. A SCIP is an acronym for a Site Candidate Information Package. And it's just that. It's a package of information on that candidate. On that water tower, it tells you everything you need to know. And each candidate needs its own package of information. And if you look at the list in section C, 2C, it lists what a lot of that information is. The property owner, management company, the site information and address, candidate profile, utilities like power and telephone, who's the providers, zoning information, photographs, maps, zoning analysis, and additional information. If you look at, let's go through the blue book here the handout, or skip. Turn, okay, 1 page, 2 pages, 3 pages, 4 pages. You're at the first, it's called Section 1 Candidate Profile. This just walks you through all the information needed. Usually this is blank. And you just check it off as you go. It's a simple checklist. And when you're out at the site driving it, and you're doing your preliminary information, I would get one of these blank forms. Get a couple of these blank forms and go out and just start filling it out by hand. Anything you don't get, you can always go back, or you can call the city, or there's different ways to get information. For this particular candidate, the first candidate was a tower. That's why they have tower owner. The tower owner is SpectraSite. Those of you not in the business very long, SpectraSite, there are companies, how do I put this? There's companies that own a bunch of towers. Their sole job is to lease those towers out as if they're buildings, office buildings, leasing out office space. Well, they own vertical towers. They're trying to lease off space on the tower. That's how they make their money. SpectraSite is one of those companies. They own a bunch of towers, and they're trying to lease off space on all their towers and collect rent, just like a landlord. There's a bunch of companies. There's SpectraSite. There's American Tower. There's Crown Castle. There's
A2C. Oh, you said we're.
Global Tower Partners.
Global Tower, and you'll see it when you're driving and you'll see this huge tower. You're going to drive up to that. There's usually a sign that says for co-location opportunities or for emergency contact this number with no name. Write the number down. Call them up. Wait, who is this? Oh, this is American Tower. Great. What's the tower number? A lot of these companies already have databases of information that'll give you everything you need to fill out this blue book. So if you have a co-location on it, your blue book shouldn't take very long. Maybe to fill out all the information, to download your photographs might take you 3-4 hours to do one blue book. So let's go through it. Contact information. Well, it's SpectraSite, and a lot of this information will be the same. If you have a SpectraSite tower, a lot of this stuff is going to be repetitive. So if you did search ring at Fullerton and Clark, and you had one of these, it's the same information as if it's, Higgins and Canfield, and you have a SpectraSite tower. It's the same information. You got contact information ground, site information. Turn the page. You got candidate profile. Visual obstructions are like if you have a rooftop. There's tall trees to the northwest with leaves. There's a water tower to the north, about 500 feet. What other visual obstructions? Tall buildings nearby. You found a tower just outside downtown Algonquin, and it's 100 feet, but there's a 120-foot brand new, with the Dunkin' Donuts at the bottom and the commercial unit, condo building right next to it. Well, that's an obstruction. It wasn't there probably when the tower was built, but it's there now. It's a visual obstruction. Environmental concerns it's usually standard. We usually order a phase 1. And we'll get to that in a minute. Airport vicinity, airport height restriction are usually searchable. Then you have section 2, equipment information, utilities, access, and cost. Utilities, who provides it for telephone and electric. Access, how do you get to the site? Well, you go through the front building, up the elevator to the door. You get 24/7 access. That's very important to the client. Once a site is up and running, they usually want to be able to access the site to service it if it goes down. Usually they have a key, they usually have a lockbox, they usually have some other type of access to get there, even if it's a phone number to call an engineer. Cost. Cost is, well, we're not doing any options, so you're not going to check the option section of that. It's usually a lease, and the standard for Verizon at least is usually a 5-year lease, bless you, a 5-year lease with 4 additional 5-year renewals. So we like to say it's a 25-year lease. And the escalation is 3% annually. Sometimes they'll say, hey, I want 15%. Usually Verizon doesn't like to venture from that. It's 3% a year, not 50% per term. It's not prepaid rent, it's usually monthly rent. You know, and if there's certain situations where it's a difficult site, you know, they'll make certain exceptions. But ideally, their pro forma lease has 5 years at 4 automatic 5-year renewals. No right for the landlord to terminate, but the client usually reserves the right to terminate. If it costs $500,000 to put up a site on a rooftop or a monopole, they don't want the landlord to be able to cancel you a year later. Conversely, you don't want to sign a deal for the client for only 1 year or 2 years, and then renew later, say, oh, no, I only want to do a 1-year term. Well, chances are your client's not going to spend that much money, $300,000, $500,000, for a 1-year lease. That's one expensive build-up. Okay, the next section is zoning. And a lot of this information, again, you can get online. You can get in our zoning file in the back of the building, or you can stop by the zoning office in the jurisdiction area. Fill out the necessary information, find out who the zoning administrator is. Jurisdiction, which I'm sure Lindsay will pick up on. You want to make sure you're in the right jurisdiction. Just because you're in Glen Ellen, out in the suburbs, you know, that's not to say your jurisdiction isn't unincorporated DuPage County. The way you find that out is you call the county, well, you call the jurisdiction you think you're in, you give them the address that you're located at, and they'll tell you, oh no, yes, that's in our jurisdiction, or no, that actually falls under unincorporated DuPage County. You call it DuPage County. Hey, does this address fall under your jurisdiction? Yes, it does. Perfect. You know you're in the right jurisdiction. You go to that jurisdiction, you get in touch with the proper zoning person, start asking them questions. Or, conversely, ideally, you look up the zoning information, the zoning maps, you do all the research yourself. If you ask a zoning person, does this require zoning? They might say yes. Why? Because it costs $1,500 to apply, and they make money off it. If you ask a zoning person or a building permit person, hey, do we need a building permit for this? Chances are probably yes. Why? Because it raises additional revenue for the village. If you could try to find out the answer by yourself, by reviewing the documents submitted that you're researching, you know, that helps out a ton. Then you don't have to ask them. You want to verify it with them. Hey, I reviewed your zoning ordinance. I see that this is a permitted use. There's no zoning, correct? Yeah, that's right. Whereas if you go in blind and say, hey, is there zoning here? Sure, yeah, there's zoning. Just file. You know, it's $3,000. File it, or $15,000 or $20,000, because we have to have a consultant review all your drawings. And you want to do, at the end of the day, you want to do your own research, try to find out your own answers before you start asking questions. In the zoning information, you'll find out about setbacks, zoning on adjacent lots. You'll know distances. Well, actually, when you're out at the site, distance of proposed tower to nearest residential lot. So if you're proposing a tower, right here, you want to know how far is it away from that residential district. You have your zoning map out here, you're like, oh, that's an R3 right there. That's about 150 feet, What's the use? Oh, well, there it's McHenry County, it's undeveloped, it's just land. To the south of me is the village of Algonquin. That's industrial, they got a couple industrial buildings there. To the east is Algonquin, to the west is McHenry County, there's a bike path. Height restrictions, you get that out of the zoning information. Now you come to the photographs. Photographs, usually there's 8 photographs minimum, usually for whatever project you're working on. The 8 photographs are taken from the north, south, east, and west, looking at the site, and then north, south, east, and west, looking away from the site. And if you want to throw a couple extra in, if there's any tall obstructions nearby, if there's access,
Utilities.
10 pictures is what I'm hearing now. We need 10 pictures. Access, proposed equipment area, utilities. Take a picture of the telephone pole, of the utility lines, anything out of the ordinary. If it's on a rooftop and there's no parapet wall or no railing, you know, anything you can do to help out the team, take pictures of it. Throw it in there. It doesn't hurt. It can only help. And these are the pictures. If you notice, it's a view of the site facing a direction. And if you turn two pages, it's a view from the site, meaning they're standing at the base of the structure looking away. That's, those are usually the photos you want to take. Sean, I'll let you continue. Want to continue?
Okay.
You can take off from, start with the lease acquisition. And that's your blue book. You put your blue book together, take your photographs, and that's primarily the blue book. On this particular blue book, they also attach, when they went to the SpectraSite website, they found information. Here's what they found. They found all this information that you're going to include in your blue book, if you turn past the pictures. This particular site person attached it to the blue book, which is fine. This, the next picture, it's the actual plaque. After the attachment, after the tower data, there's a picture on the top left corner of what a sign looks like. It's telling you it's owned by SpectraSite. There's a number there. Then you also attach a street atlas map showing where you found it. There's a couple of zooms in here. The third map is a topographical map. On the bottom left it says Delorme. That shows you the AMSL, above mean sea level. And then afterwards you have a zoning summary, which Lindsay will hit on in a little bit. Afterwards you have the actual zoning map and then the zoning ordinance. And that is your blue book.
Okay.
And Sean's going to be talking about lease acquisition.
All right, lease acquisition. Primarily, as JT explained, we're out there acquiring sites for the carrier, and that usually encumbers a long-term lease agreement. What's that? Oh, I'm not on screen. Let me go back up.
Your head's chopped out.
So basically what we do, as you see it under A, is who owns the property. We have to get a hold of the right owner contact who officially owns the property. A lot of companies, particularly office buildings, have management companies that do manage the buildings and everything. Usually we can contact them. They'll give us ownership information. Sometimes we have to deal with them directly to get a lease agreement, but otherwise, most of those office building representatives do not deal specifically with these telecom leases. They deal with office space rentals, so they may refer you to an actual owner contact. But usually, if it's a raw land site, if there's obviously the owner's buildings on the property and he or she has a business there, you can usually just go walk right in. Who's the owner of the property? A lot of people might think you're trying to sell them something, but usually you can just explain, well, here we're working for Verizon, Nextel, wherever, looking to acquire space, locate a cell tower, and basically like lease part of the property where you will generate $1,000, $1,500 a month. They're usually interested in talking to you. So that's
Yeah,
usually pretty easy.
Sometimes when I call, they're like, I don't want to buy any Verizon phones. Then I get hung up on. And then I call them back and say, listen, I want to pay you rent for your rooftop. I'm going to give you $1,000 a month for the next 25 years to let me put antennas up there. Oh, okay. And then they want to talk to you. It's like winning. It's almost like winning the lotto. I mean, we have people calling us, at least calling me, saying, "Hey, I got a property out here in DeKalb. Can you build a tower for me? My neighbor has one. I really need the money." I mean, it's really you're giving away money is basically what it is. So.
Very true. So yes, and I get those calls as well too. And there may be areas like some of these new sites where you get Verizon over in northwest Indiana, or they're in farmland. And obviously it's undeveloped farm property. There's no owner's building or their house on the property. There's no place for you to walk to or contact somebody. So as you know, Joe has been detailed, Susan, we have to go to these tax maps. Basically the tax maps, I don't know, Karen, Andrew, if you guys have ever gotten this on your real estate research, you go to the tax maps, every county has them. These sometimes have them online, or you actually have to go to the county building, go to the area you're looking, specify the exact property. Sometimes it's tough to tell with those farmlands because you don't always know. There's no point for you to measure it, there's no driveway or anything. But it's basically you go out and you find the property index number, which we'll get into later as you're training that you guys are actually doing sites. You can access who the actual tax bills go to, the actual owner of the property and everything. And if it goes to Joe Smith in Wadsworth, Illinois, it has the actual property, the address where it goes to. Call for information, Joe Smith in Wadsworth, Illinois. You get that phone number, you call the landlord. Yeah, I came across your property in northwest Indiana by tax map. I want to send you a proposal. Propose putting a tower on your property for Verizon Wireless. And again, as JT mentioned, it generates a lot of income. So everybody's always usually interested in talking to you. Sometimes, bigger, larger companies, like if you came across a big piece of property owned by Coca-Cola. A lot of times larger corporations aren't always interested as the individual landlord, because basically what these leases do, it ties down a little part of their property. It's a long-term lease, as JT mentioned, up to 25 years. These big, huge corporations, $1,500 a month, $1,000 a month, that doesn't mean anything to them if it ties down their property. So that's something we'll divulge in. We'll go into a little more detail, but that's usually very difficult, and it takes forever to get a lease for them. So it's the mom and pop, the individual owners are the best from a leasing standpoint. But that's basically a couple of different ways how you get the actual landlord. The right contact. You always want to be speaking to the right person, as everybody knows, instead of a management company or something like that. Sometimes you will have to do that, but typically you want to speak to the right person.
Can you talk about sidwells and pinpoint real quick?
I can talk about that. As I mentioned, the tax maps that you go to different counties. What we do in this office here, and Lindsay, myself, Joe can point out to everybody else, we have all of them for Cook County, and most of the other counties do. We have what? DuPage. Now, some of them are what? I think the Cook County ones are like 10 years old, something like that.
We're getting new ones too.
We're getting new ones, okay, so that's good. So they're pretty accurate. Obviously, property lines change and everything in 10 years, but they're pretty accurate. You can go to those. We have a program that's called Pinpoint. It's in the front of, how many computers is it on? It's on a couple.
I think 3.
It's on 3 computers. The primary one we use it. Go ahead, Lindsay.
It's going to be internet-based starting July 1st or something like that.
Each computer will have access, or whoever has internet access
We'll
can get
have
access.
one username and password for the whole company, but everyone will be able to access it.
Very good. So.
And that gives you the PIN number for a piece of property. So if you're driving down the street and you're like, oh, I wonder who owns that, you can look it up in the Sidwell map. It'll give you the PIN number. You take that number, it's usually like a 9-digit number, like a social security number. You enter it into pinpoints.
Good point. Basically, Sidwell, it's tax map. Sidwell map is the same thing. I guess I don't want to confuse everybody, but I don't even know where Sidwell comes from.
Maybe it's the producers.
Yeah, whatever. So
And it'll tell you who owns it.
it's the same thing, and you're going to go to this pinpoint program. So this will save you the time of having to go to whatever county you're looking at sites. If it's a poor county, Indiana, which is an hour and a half away, it'll save you the time. You can find out your information right there online, who the owner is, and save yourself, a 3-hour trip and trying to find that out. So basically, that's the primary way we contact the property owner or get to know actually the correct information by stopping into the property, whatever, or it's farmland, coming across the Sidwell tax maps to find out who actually owns the property. Under B, contact the property owner agent with the business terms. Typically, this has, as JT mentioned, we have a pro forma, which is pretty much every carrier has their blank lease, their standard lease. They're all different, we're all very similar in the same way. Verizon's, I think, is probably a 10-page document. They do differ a little bit based on, 1, if it's a raw land candidate, 2, if it's a building or rooftop, is a little bit different form, and 3, I think a water tank candidate. They have one if the site's going to be antennas mounted on the water tank. So based on which site you're approaching, you have to make sure you give the correct form to that owner. So it's a blank form and everything. We do have, and I'll provide you examples of a proposal letter. So if you are sending an actual letter to a landlord, if you don't happen to speak to him or her, you can drop it in the mail to them with a proposal letter, explaining basically what you're looking for and kind of breaking down some brief terms. It's a 2-page proposal letter that I have. Joe, I know you've used it a couple times. Just basically breaks down the simple terms, how it's a long-term agreement. You're offering them X amount of dollars per month. Explaining that Verizon, and whatever the carrier is responsible for all construction, all costs on their part. What else is in there? The exact lease space you're looking for, if you're looking for a 50 by 50 area or 60 by 60 area, whatever it is. So it gives them a real brief synopsis of what to look at. And they usually put in a copy of the agreement in there. Typically, they don't want to look through a 10-page form themselves, but obviously the 2-page proposal letter gives them a real good idea what they're looking for. Typically, when I send those out, I always get a response back. Most of the time. Go ahead, Susan.
What is Verizon's typical lease area for raw land?
Typical lease area, the minimum that they need, typically the absolute minimum is a 30 by 40 based on their size of equipment shelter. That is their minimum size. As JT mentioned earlier, if they can get a 100 by 100 lease area, that's great because that gives them more space to lease out to the other carriers, the T-Mobile, AT&T, Singular, are both leased out their tower space as well as additional ground space.
And if we lease 100 by 100, do they fence in 100 by 100 when they build?
Typically they will.
Okay.
Typically they will. The other carrier, like the American Tower, Spectre Site sometimes doesn't do that. Obviously they don't want to spend those additional costs doing that, but typically AT&T, if they do get, I'm sorry, Verizon, if they do get that, they will fence. JT, you know, is that correct?
Well,
Typically do that.
Wayne, sometimes?
90% of the time they fence it in.
Not telling them they'll fence in their area and everything. That way, if another carrier is looking and comes across our site, they see they got a big lease area, they'll come to Verizon and say, okay, we're looking to do a lease with you. You know, we see enough space in there. That way, they can just deal with Verizon and have to deal with the property landlord as well.
Right, and the whole purpose of this, I mean, that whole section B under part D, when you're out at the site and you happen to run into the landlord, you kind of want to just, or the management company, you just want to get a feel for where they are. Even though they want to do a deal, again, they might go, well, you know, if you're downtown Chicago, well, we don't want to tie this up too much because we're going to sell the building to some developers soon. How about a 3-year lease? Yeah, no, the answer is no. Oh yeah, we want to do a deal, but we want $4,000 because that's what my buddy's getting down the street. Yeah, no, we have certain rent parameters that if they exceed that, you know, and they won't budge, that pretty much dismisses the candidate. If the term's too short, or if the rent's too high, the client sometimes will not look at that candidate just because it's just beyond market rates. There's actually a market rate for cell sites. I mean, it's almost like real estate. It pretty much is real estate. It's vertical real estate is what they call it, and it's all for lease. And there is a rate. When they're asking above market rates, they will walk away from the deal. They won't even waste their time. So you kind of want to get a rapport with the landlord, get a sense of where they are, send them your proposal letter with your terms, your 5-year renewals, 4 or 5-year renewals, and your $1,000 a month with 3% escalation. If they're amenable to that, you send out the confirming memo, then you're on your way to closing a deal. Which is why we pursue up to three candidates per ring. If you have more, great. Try to pick your best ring.
And basically, you come across, to touch on what JT said, a lot more landlords are becoming a lot more savvy nowadays, and even John, Ty, you guys, you do an EBDO. There's making a rooftop that has 3 carriers on there. Just basically because zoning directs, obviously you're not going to be able to build a tower right by there, get it approved if there's an available rooftop. The local jurisdiction, Village of Hoffman Estates, whatever it is, will say, if you go to them in a hearing and try to get a tower proposed, they'll say, what about that rooftop right there? A lot of times we're forced to go to these sites, so that's why you see quite a few landlords with 2 or 3 towers on their property, or if they have a rooftop, there's 2 or 3 carriers on the rooftop, because either that building's the tallest building there, or from a zoning standpoint, you're kind of forced to go there.
Right. Again, when you're doing your preliminary research, and they give you a telecommunications ordinance, and you read it, it will say you must be able to negate any existing structures. So anything tall in the area, you have to prove why you can't go on that tower. And then you can build your own tower. Because they don't want any new towers, they want to use what's already up there. And when you read that in your preliminary research, when you're doing your homework, checking out zoning, you want to find out those types of things. Because you might be working with landlord C, who's like, oh yeah, let's do it, I'm going to sign, I'm going to take $300 a month, let's do it soon. And all of a sudden you have your zoning hearing, like Sean said, and they go, why can't you go on the building down the street? I don't know. Well, it's in our ordinance, disapproved. There goes 3 months of your time. So you want to make sure you do that preliminary research on zoning.
Which will make a very ticked off client. So basically, and getting back to the savvy landlords, obviously these landlords have gone through the leasing process. They have 2 other carriers up there. They've gone through the leasing process twice before with the other carriers. So they're a little more savvy in regards to lease negotiations, terms and everything. Obviously they're going to factor in what they're getting from the other 2 carriers. Factor in based on what you offer them. If you offer them $1,000 and T-Mobile is paying $2,200, that owner might laugh in your face and say, get out of here. Don't come back again, knowing that you will have to come back because from a zoning standpoint, he knows you have to come back to him if you want to site in that area. So it's very sad, landlords are getting a lot more savvy instead of, the farmland owner in Northwest Indiana who will do high fives with you for getting $300 per month. They're a lot more savvy nowadays, and you'll definitely come across that. So, but basically, we contact that property owner and get that pro forma agreement in their hands for them to review. And basically, we just start talking, we get into the negotiation process. And what that does, typically, and we found out most of the time, a lot of these landlords do send the actual agreement to their attorney, which makes perfect sense. Obviously, they see a 10-page agreement. It's a lot of legal terms and everything. They're not going to feel comfortable themselves. Sometimes they don't. If they're very anxious to get a lease or something like that, they may look it over themselves and decide to deal with you directly. Otherwise, they send it to their attorney. So they wait for their comments from their attorney to come back. They'll come back to you as they're waiting. They say, sometimes attorneys, no offense, take too long or anything. It's not on their high priority list. So we typically have to follow up the landlord. Hey, did you get those comments back from your attorney? No offense to Joe. 4 people here, but anyway. So we typically have to follow up the landlord and everything to get their comments to the lease. So as we're waiting for that, if their attorney speaks to us directly, a lot of times, or at least on Verizon's end, we have Verizon's attorney speak to them directly on the legal terms.
Okay, so here, we have our weekly meetings. Karen, you're giving me an update. Andrew, you're giving us your updates. Where are we? Okay, I'm going to ask you, did you find a candidate? Yes. Did you talk to the landlord? Yes. When am I going to get my lease? I want a signed lease by the landlord. When are you going to deliver to me? Normally, it's within 60 days, let's say 45 to 60 days. We should be able to negotiate a lease and get it signed by the landlord. If it's difficult, very difficult, sometimes that might get a little longer. If it's owned by a REIT, a real estate investment trust, and the owners are a bunch of Europeans located in Switzerland, and you got to get their trustee who's located in Zurich to sign off on it. I mean, obviously it can get pretty convoluted and difficult, but those are rare exceptions. For the most part, you want to try to negotiate with the landlord and get the lease signed, because we're going to ask you every week, is the blue book done? Where's my lease? When is it coming? You told me it's coming in May 7th. It's May 5th. JT, I have to bump it out. Why do you have to bump it out? What happened? And I think the hardest part of the job is a part you can't control. It's trying to get the landlord to call you back. They say they're interested, they've got the lease you dropped off, but you don't have their comments yet, so you can't proceed. And that is the hardest part of the job, is trying to close the lease, trying to get the landlord to call you back, trying to get the management company to call the landlord, to call his attorney, to get the comments to the landlord, to get the comments to the management company, to get the comments back to you. It's the hardest part of the job. Joseph, what are some of the things you do if a landlord's not responsive?
I'm trying to think of an example of a site.
Letters,
set up a meeting,
emails.
Well,
We
yeah.
might call them and email some. We all know some people, they never call you back, but they'll respond in email.
That's the key, is persistence.
Yeah.
Like, what are some of the things you do? Like, do you drop by, pop by?
Well, I was thinking about court. They're in Florida, but yes, local sites, of course. If I got to stop by, leave my card, get the person's boss. I mean, whatever it takes. It's just being persistent, cranking out emails, letters, offering. In rare situations, we offered a signing bonus if they returned us a landlord signed lease by a certain date. We've done that. Of course, you'd have to get that approved through your project manager or through a client. But mainly, it's just being persistent. That's how you get through to them.
Send them emails. If you can get their email address first time you talk to them, they check their emails every day. You can send them reminders every other day. You don't want to be a pest, but you want to be persistent, because Susan's going to be asking you, or Sean's going to be asking you, where's my lease? And you're going to hear it. You're going to hear a lot. Where's my lease? When's it coming in? Where are the landlord's comments? Because when you report to us, or Susan and Sean, they have to report to the client in front of everybody. So if you're not making movement on your site, then you're not being persistent enough. So.
Okay.
Touch up on MLAs and SLAs.
Okay. Oh, just a couple things before
Oh,
there.
sorry.
Let's confirm your memorandum. Was that the memorandum of lease?
Yeah.
We can talk that in more detailed and everything. The memorandum of lease is just when the lease is actually signed, the actual memorandum goes on file with the county. It's not the actual lease itself, just a memorandum with a real 2-page document that goes on file with the county showing the lease is in place. Basically, as you finalize lease terms, what we typically do, and we have a chart process to use, as you're in negotiations, you order title on the property. This, in Verizon's case, you order with Verizon's attorney, you order title of property. Most of you guys are familiar with title, obviously, to get the verification. Who's the official owner of the property? You know, whether it's an individual owner, company, or everything. Obviously, title comes back if there's any issues with the property, as in there might be easements running across the property that might affect where you want to put your lease area. There might be, you know, a storage tank, or the power company might have an easement running across the area where you want to put it. That all affects your issues with you finalizing this lease agreement. Basically, it's something we need to have in hand as as the landlord signs the lease, to make sure it is the right person signing it, and there's no other issues with your property that could affect you finalizing this agreement. Of course, we typically, most of the carriers, and everybody likes to have the actual landlord sign first, then the carrier will sign second and everything. So your primary objective is get the landlord to sign first. Rare occasions, you know, the carrier, a landlord might request the carrier to sign first. That is possible, but typically we would like to have the landlord sign first instead of the carrier. So basically, under D, MLAs and SLAs, as JT touched before, basically with all the other carriers, there are what's called an MLA, a master lease agreement, with all the other carriers that, as in that case, I'm working Verizon. Verizon has with everybody. Most of you are probably pretty familiar with this. I know John, and I think you guys have dealt with Crown Castle and some of the other tower owners. But it's with the other carriers and the other tower-owned companies, as JT mentioned, specifically tower companies that are not offering any service, not service providers, but their specific goal is to own towers and lease it out to carriers. Spectre Sites, Crown Castle, Global Tower Partners, American Tower. But basically, Verizon, as like to use an example, has an MLA, master lease agreement with all these carriers. And that's a 15-page document saying basically there is an agreement in place where if Verizon wants to locate on their tower, or if they happen to manage a building or something like that, there is an agreement in place for us to do. So that, like I said, isn't typically, and most of the other carriers have this as well. If you guys are going to work on different projects, you mentioned you're going to be doing some Nextel work. Nextel does have this with Verizon, with Sprint, Singular, and everything like that.
Yeah, basically, it's already pre-negotiated deal. So whenever you run across a tower, everything's negotiated. Everything's done. Whether it's a Nextel tower downtown, Nextel tower in Algonquin, Nextel tower in Skokie, everything's already negotiated. When you get one of those sites, it's good, because hopefully you can close the deal quick because everything's negotiated, and your numbers for closing will be up for the month. Everything's already pre-negotiated. It's a master lease agreement already pre-negotiated between the carriers.
Yeah. So again, when you hear that acronym, MLA, master lease agreement, means there is an agreement in place between whatever carrier you're working for and the proposed site, tower owner, building owner you're looking to work on. So as JT mentioned, yes, that means everything's negotiated, but what has to happen to actually finalize the agreement on that specific location, an SLA has to be put together, a site lease agreement for that specific site. So that's what the SLA acronym stands for.
How do you normally get the SLA?
How do we normally get it? Typically, the actual provider, whoever tower owner it is, provides that to you. Provides you the site lease agreement. It's basically 2, 3-page, sometimes 4 pages, depending on which, if it's Crown Castle or Spectre Sites or US Cellular, they typically provide that to you. There are certain cases where Verizon, in this case again, Verizon has their form and we can prepare it, everything. But for you, for like Karen, Andrew, if you guys are Verizon, I think US Cellular is the actual form that we have. We have their SLA form where we prepare it and then send it to them for approval. So it's basically just a 2 or 3-page document. It refers to that MLA based on all the actual legal terms and everything, but as a site-specific lease for that exact site. It has all the address and specific information for that site. On rare occasion, we sometimes have to, well, actually, on a lot of occasions, we have to negotiate a particular price for that specific site. Because a lot of times the carriers, of course, they'll charge a lot more for downtown Chicago than in, you know, out in farmland in Northwest Indiana. So it is something specific that you have to negotiate. Good thing about MLAs and SLAs, again, a lot of them are pre-negotiated. The tower companies, obviously that is their primary objective, to get a carrier to come on their towers. So they're always very interested. Many of you guys, as you get involved in the Verizon project, Nextel, will have the contact. As soon as you stress interest that they're looking, they'll be contacting you all the time. Oh yeah, great. Want to get you on there. I just want to get your co-location application in, get you processed, get the information so we can get you moving. So obviously they got salespeople. For salespeople, that's, you know, they get a commission and everything.
They're like leasing agents
They're leasing
for
agents.
office. They're like, oh, you want to look at some office space? Hey, you want to look at some tower space? We got tower space for it. It's their sole job is to lease that space.
So typically dealing with them, you know, obviously they're interested in getting you on there, so they'll typically move forward for you pretty fast. So
The most
we'll get more
recent-
detail on that, and I can provide copies of what one would look like to show you the exact form and how simple they are.
The most recent MLA, master lease agreement we have was with ComEd. Andrew, you just did an outline for that. Do you have any notes with you on that?
Not really.
Okay. MLA with ComEd, the high tension tower lines, they now do deals. So if you're working on the Verizon project and you are across, you're not finding anything, or, you know, it's all residential, but you see high tension tower lines, and you see ComEd there, it's considered a viable candidate. And they're a public utility, and in certain situations, you're exempt from zoning and permitting. Certain situations, because they're a public utility. Which is good, cuts down your due diligence time, and you're going straight to construction.
I
So
guess
make sure you include that stuff.
they do anything on any antenna installation on the towers
have
is
to
done
do
by their own
themselves.
contractors.
Right.
Instead of Verizon.
And we do the ground stuff ourselves, but they may supervise. and-
Due to liability, you know, they don't want you climbing their towers, getting electrocuted, with the possibility of getting electrocuted. So they have their own contractor, which is MJ Electric. They do all the work, including maintenance on the tower. That's already pre-negotiated and agreed between ComEd and Verizon. So,
Did you want to walk through the
No.
Verizon lease?
no, that's fine. I'm gonna have them do that on their own because it's gonna take a while to do that. Thanks, Sean.
Okay, no problem.
JT, can I
yeah.
mention one thing?
Go ahead.
When we're citing sites, if you happen to come across a water tank, I think it's important that you ask the jurisdiction for a painting schedule, because I unfortunately ran into a situation where antennas were installed. 2 months to the day after the installation, we found out they were painting. The antennas had to come off the tower and be moved on to a temporary site. So we need to find out what the next painting schedule is, because if that's the case, you don't want to have the company install them and have to pay to take them down and put them back up again.
That's a good idea, thanks, Susan. So, yeah, in that situation, they might have waited 2 additional months for them to paint the tower and then gone up and done their installation. So, that's pretty much it. Section E, zoning approvals and permits. We already touched on this. This is some of the information you are looking for when you're going into the jurisdiction. You're looking for zoning maps, ordinances, special telecom ordinances, applications for zoning, applications for special use, any other requirements, forms, checklists. You want the schedule, because I'm going to ask you, hey Andrew, is there zoning on this site? Yes, there is, JT. Well, when is the zoning hearing? I don't know. Well, that's not good enough. You have to find out. You have to know, okay, today is April 27th. I'm going to try to make the July hearing, because my guy says he can get the lease done in 4 months. So I'm going to shoot for July 18th, which means according to my schedule, I have to submit for the July 18th, 30 days prior to that hearing, which means by June 18th, I have to submit everything. So by June 18th, I have to submit, well, where's my checklist? The 25 sets of stamped drawings. So I'm going to go to the construction manager and say, hey, I need 25 sets of stamped drawings, 25 surveys, 25 site plans. I have to do the application. So you got to have a schedule. So the question Susan's going to ask you, is the blue book done? Is the lease done? Zoning, is there zoning? Yes. When is the zoning hearing? What are you shooting for? You always have to have a target in mind, not A couple weeks. I'll file in a couple weeks. That doesn't really give them, because this whole project is about timelines and deliverables. Their whole objective is to get the site on the air. They're going to say this has to be on the air by November 2005. So that means by September 2005, all the real estate, zoning, and permitting has to be done, which means by X amount of days, 30 days prior to that, you have to have your lease signed and permits in. So it's all about a schedule, which is why we're going to press you for your dates. It's all about dates. Everything is driven by dates. No matter what client you're working on, they're going to ask you, when is the zoning hearing? When do you have to submit? Is there one hearing with the Zoning Board of Appeals? Is there a zoning with the Zoning Board, the Planning Commission? And then you have to go in front of City Council? 3 different entities altogether. You might have 3 hearings to get a zoning approved. The City Council may just be, okay, we got the recommendation from the Zoning Board, which they approved. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Pass. Then you have to wait till the next hearing for them to ratify the minutes of this meeting before you can, so you might have to know that too. So that might be an additional 30 days you're losing. So when I ask you when is the zoning hearing, you should know when the zoning hearing is, what time the zoning hearing is, which is why you want to look for the Zoning Board and City Council meeting schedule. You want a list of their city-owned property if they have it, any approval processes, schedules, fees, timelines, and any notification requirements. Sometimes if you have a special use on a water tower, they have to post a sign to the public, put an ad in the newspaper, whatever they want you to do, you got to do it. You got to jump through the hoops of what they're presenting you, otherwise it'll get disapproved. If you miss one person in that notification requirement, they can shoot down your entire zoning. A situation we had, I believe it was a church that was constructed. They missed sending notification to a person. He ended up being one of the major complainants, who was also very wealthy. They had to take the tower down. How do you explain that one? I mean, it's tough to do. The city said, well, you know what, you missed it. You have a notification within 250 feet of this facility. You missed this guy. You don't have a certified letter stating that he received one. Take it down. How do you tell your client that? You're in trouble. We're in trouble. Anyway, zoning is very important. And it's not to be taken lightly. So in a nutshell, I'm going to have Lindsay come up and talk about permitting and a little bit of zoning maybe, and Wayne's going to come up and talk about construction drawings and surveys and some issues associated with that. In a nutshell, you get your search ring, do your preliminary homework, plot it out, how you're going to drive the sites, make sure you got your maps, get a good map, have your blank copies of your blue books, get your zoning done, stop by the zoning office, drive your sites, write down a couple of candidates, take all your pictures while you're out there. Because what I don't want to see is on your expense reports, because you get paid for mileage that you drive, other than to and from work. What I don't want to see is, I went to this site Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and it was 45 miles away, so 90 miles each way, or 90 miles round trip. I don't want to see you going to the site 2 days in a row, 3 days. Ideally, you're at the site maybe 2 times a month, 3 times a month. If it's really a lot of activity, maybe 4 times, but I'm going to question your productivity if you're going to a site 4 times a month if I see that on your expense report. So you're out there. Okay, you got your search ring, you got your maps, you got your zoning stuff done, you're talking to landlords. Keep working the site. You've got 2 landlords that are like, I want the deal, I really want the deal. Work them both. We will give you the guidance on which one to pursue. So don't think like, oh, I don't know which one I'm going to go with. We have a lot of guidance here. We'll give you a lot of management direction on that information. The last thing I wanted to briefly touch on, and we'll hand out some samples, are some of the reports associated with this. It's nice to take a look at them and read them and just to get a little familiar with them so you know what we're talking about. But there's title reports, there's an environmental report, phase 1, phase 2, there's SHPO, there's NEPA, all these other acronyms that you're like, well, wow, it's kind of overwhelming at first. You don't really know what all this information is. We'll help you as you go along. We just want to familiarize you with the basics, and we'll tell you when you need to order it. So if we say order title, you don't have to know, oh my God, when did he say to order title? Don't worry about that. We'll tell you, order title. Write it down in your notes in the meeting, order title, get it done, then you just follow up with the attorney. on when that title's coming in. Order phase 1. You're like, oh, when am I supposed to order phase? Don't worry about it. We will tell you when to order phase 1. We'll tell you when to order title. But then what are we going to do? We're going to say, hey, is it in? Where's title? Where's phase 1? You don't really have to know what the report came up, but I'm going to ask you, hey, I need a date. When is it coming in? Well, I talked to the attorney. He said this one happens to have a lot of encroachments on it. It's 60 pages of Schedule B docs, so he has to go through all that to write his opinion letter. It's going to take an additional 21 days. So May 25th is when it's coming in. Okay, great. You're up to speed. You know what's going on with your stuff. There's going to be a big tracker, and Susan and Sean are in charge of running that tracker, and Rose. A big tracker of information. Title ordered, title received. It's when you order it and when it's received. Each item has ordered and received, and we're going to ask you for fresh dates each week. Make sure you come to the meeting fully aware. So when we go, Karen, where's title? I don't know. I'll call the attorney. Well, that kind of defeats the purpose of the update meeting for us. So when you don't come to the meetings prepared, you're wasting our time. Because then you got to be like, let me go check on that. I don't know. Well, we're going to do it every week. The first couple of weeks might be a little bit of a learning period, but it all comes down to dates. We're going to ask you the same questions every single week. You're going to become familiar with the acronyms, and hopefully you'll succeed. You got your search ring, your maps, zoning stuff. You're stopping by landlords, talking to them about business terms. 5 years, 4 or 5 year renewals, $1,000 a month. Here's a copy of our lease. See you later. You have a card, you have an email address. Keep following up with them. Find out your zoning. Boom, you're ready. Update your little tracker. Whatever you use for your project management of your own stuff to keep your stuff organized, utilize it. It's very helpful if you're organized. And that's about it. It all comes down to dates and deliverables. And it's the same question we ask you every week, at the same time. Blue Book done? Is the lease done? When is zoning? When is a permit coming in? Because that's all the client's asking us. Let's hand those out afterwards, Joseph. We'll have Lindsay talk right now about permitting.
Actually, before Lindsay talks about, when we talk about tech walks real quick.
Okay, tech walks are good.
Tech walks. Do you want me to stand in front of
Yeah,
the
go ahead, sure.
Looks so good on it.
That's all right. Basically what a tech walk is when you guys have decided on the sites, basically bringing Verizon or whatever carrier you're working for out to actually look at the sites. So it's bringing, like at Verizon, we have a tech walk schedule we do on Wednesdays. We got our certain sites, so Verizon's construction manager, the radio frequency engineer, their operations people come out there. The operations people, after the site is built, they have to service it, stop by once a month, and maintain the site. Everybody's coming to look at the site that you chose. So it's basically, it's up to you to know what you're doing, and so basically what you do is you come out and bring copies of this blue book for everybody, typically about 6 copies or something like that, so you give them to their operations people, their construction manager, and also Wayne or Mark, say on the Verizon project, will have the actual architect, the A&E company, who will actually be drawing up your site plan and eventually doing the construction drawings. So this is basically your site. You typically want to have the landlord contact that with you. If it's a building owner or the management company, you'll a lot of times need them, or even like a building engineer, take you guys up to the roof and everything. So you want to pre-arrange that with them. Like I said, this is your site. Everything starts with you, so it's very important to be organized. And again, you're bringing out all the client representatives. So it's very important to be on top of things, be very organized and diligent. Be there. So when you get on that rooftop or go to that raw land, you want to have all these, again, have all copies of these for everybody and say, okay, this is where the site's going, right in this corner here and everything. You go to the A&E, the architect, everything. There's a 5-foot setback, you'll see it in your blue book, 5-foot setback, so our equipment's got to be, our fence line's got to be 5 feet off the rear. There's got to be a 10-foot side setback, so you have to come up 5 feet and 10 feet. Again, this isn't when you're doing your zoning research, you guys have to verify. But it's very important to be organized out there so you can tell everybody, because if they come up with a site plan that has it in the absolute corner, and that's wrong. And they have to revise it and everything, and basically the client doesn't have to see revisions, go back and forth and change. if you made the mistake. And again, it all comes back to you as the individual person. So you want to be very organized with that. Verizon's construction manager, or whatever carries construction, they ask you questions. Well, Karen, what about, that property over there? It looks like it's right by a power pole. Well, Chris Chambers, it's like that one, that's not zoned correctly. This is zoned correctly. We're permitted use to put a tower on this property because we made the setbacks, and we have a willing landlord right here. So, okay,
They will
that's
question
fine.
you.
They will question you why you chose that
Absolutely
site.
question you. Why are we going here? Why is the equipment going? I want to put the equipment there. Why?
Right. Well, Chris, you can't put the equipment there because if it goes in that corner, then we don't make the side setback. So you can't do it. That's why we got to go here, Chris Chambers.
Then you got to get a variance, or you have to
Yes,
ask for
Chris.
special consideration.
He asks the most questions. So.
You are the quarterback for this team. It's like a team. It's basically a team out there. You're the quarterback. If you don't say a word, people will just stand there and wait.
Mhm.
Just like, you are the quarterback. You are telling everything. It's going here. You're the liaison with the landlord. You're talking to the landlord. You're talking to the team. You're facilitating everything. You are the quarterback of the team, basically. You're organizing and orchestrating everything. And Wayne's going to be there to help you out, obviously. Wayne or Mark, Mark's the other construction person, he's going to help you out and be like, well, JT, maybe we should put it over here. Or why can't we put it, a little bit of whispering, then you tell everyone. Or maybe Wayne will talk. But Wayne's going to be there to help you, the construction manager.
Right. So you might say, hey, why can't we just build an access drive right there? Well, Chris, the landlord wants us to utilize their existing access drive to do it right here. This is why we're drawing it like this. What should be organized. Another example is on a rooftop. RF might want to put the antennas on top of the penthouse, the radio frequency engineer. And you have to say, no, we can't do it. Zoning says only antennas can be put on top of the actual building. They can't be mounted to the penthouse. So you can't put them there. Again, you're in charge. It's information you need to know at the actual walk. So it all comes to you. It's everything of where stuff can be put and everything, or on different occasions, like Verizon has a big equipment shelter that's very heavy and a lot of times cannot be put on a roof, or we actually go into a room, or say if it's an apartment building, we actually take up an apartment or an office building, one of the offices, and put their equipment in there. And Chris Chambers, well, why can't we put this on the roof? Well, Chris, structurally, it's an old building, the columns, we have the old building drawings. It doesn't look like the weight's going to be able to accommodate us up there. That's why we're going to go in this room. So again, you're responsible for being organized there and be able to address all these questions, because, then Verizon, because Verizon's construction manager's not happy, he comes and goes to his boss, well, FMHC was all messed up out there, they didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah,
So-
the equipment fits, but we don't have an access easement. We can't get access to the site. Or there's not enough room for the equipment. We just wasted our morning. We drove out to Belvedere, Illinois. They proposed it at the water tower, and there's no room to put the equipment shelter. What the heck is going on here? Yeah, we get a bad rap, we get no more work. So you want to make sure you're on top of it. You've been to the site. You know what's going to work. If you have any questions, you talk to Wayne. You show Wayne, get Wayne out to the site maybe before the tech walk, so we don't, do anything wrong. Do a walkthrough with Wayne if you have to, or with Mark, whoever it is. If you have questions, ask. Don't wait until the client's out there. That's the worst time to do it.
So, yeah, and again, obviously, work with the project managers, myself, Susan, those new, obviously, Dick E.G. for the next project. They'll be able to give you some direction on, what exactly each client wants, but that's one thing, and, we've all run into problems in the past with where our clients been dissatisfied and going to walk with us about, what's going on in the situation. It's our responsibility to know that information up front. So I just want to touch on that. I know Wayne wanted to touch on that.
If
Is there
I-
anything else, Wayne? I'm sorry.
If I can add 2 cents to that, to Tech Walk. Before you go on a Tech Walk where you assemble all the departments from Verizon and what he's telling you, you always want to visit your site with the landlord contact. Actually visit the site, walk it, talk it through with the landlord before you Tech Walk.
Absolutely.
That's critical. Don't ever go on a Tech Walk if you have not visited that site with the landlord and talked everything through. Because you're going to come up with issues like access, and you're going to discover all sorts of things. Maybe the landlord's going to point out things about the property. Very critical.
Kind of like I'm expanding my building to go where you're proposing.
Exactly.
You can't put it there, and it's like, oh, okay, sorry.
You will make yourself look real bad on a Tech Walk if you haven't visited the site with the landlord before the Tech Walk. So just make that part of your process.
Make sure they're on the same page with you.
Susan, do you have something you want to ask?
Who actually schedules the tech walk for Verizon?
Actually myself, for the Verizon sites, along with the other site act companies, we schedule every Wednesday.
Okay, and
It's a
just
tech
on
walk day.
Wednesdays, right?
Just on Wednesdays, as of right now, just on Wednesdays. We usually schedule them a week in advance. So, go ahead, Andrew.
When in the process does that usually occur?
Good question. Basically, once we get a feel that the landlord is interested, you might not have a signed lease yet, but you're in the middle of negotiations. You've discussed terms with them, and those terms are okay. It's just a matter of the attorneys, working out the lease negotiations. Basically say, oh yeah, this is ready to be walked. We want to get a site plan together because actually one part of the agreement is the actual Exhibit A, the agreement is the actual site plan. Or sometimes, America, if it's raw land, sometimes we can draw it up. A lot of times we'll need an actual architectural drawing of the site plan, shown specifically where the location is going. But it's basically a feel on our part of when we feel, okay, we're ready to walk, so we're ready not to waste everybody's time, we're ready to get everybody out there and fully invest in the site to move forward. Basically, that's it. Wayne, do you have anything more in tech walks?
More on what Joe said, when you do a walk with your landlord, you should narrow down to 2 locations for the equipment. So that way when you get out there, construction can look at it and say, okay, we prefer this one, why? I mean, to go out there and say, well, we got 4 or 5 possible options on this rooftop. I mean, we're gonna spend more than 2 hours looking at everything. And we got, what, 6, 7 walks per day going, so we don't have time to do that. So you should narrow it down to 2 locations on the rooftop.
Now, Karen, Andrew, John, everything, you guys might, I'm not sinking in yet, obviously you don't really know what I'm talking about, but once we get out there and myself, Susan, I'll probably be driving, if we get these new sites, I'll be driving out with you, kind of going the same way I did with Joe, and Joe had the same background as you. Exactly, walking through sites, going through everything, so what we're seeing now actually does sink in at a later point. So even though it doesn't make too much sense to you right now.
The other sidewalks, rooftops especially, talk to the landlord ahead of time, to have him start looking for his building drawings.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
If he doesn't have them, it's another 2 to 3 weeks to have the architect get out there and map it to see if it's going to pass.
What's mapping like?
Mapping is sending 1 or 2 man crew out there, measuring up the beams, finding the beams, looking at the concrete floor, if it's a wood floor, and then they gotta decide if it's concrete, what type, post tension, meaning there's rods in the concrete, can we drill into it? So we need to have the drawings out front.
Basically, sometimes rooftop installations get very complicated in regards to where equipment can go, if the building can actually hold our equipment, even or building out a room, Verizon's got some heavy equipment, so it becomes a lot of times a structural issue. And also, if you're running a room to run cables from the actual equipment to the antennas on the roof, it's got to run outside the building. So a lot of times it gets a little difficult and tricky at times. So basically, we want to get a copy of the drawings. And in Chicago, you got a lot of old buildings. Sometimes these drawings are from 1920, but they're still valid. I mean, they're still the original building drawings. We always like to get copies. Typically, landlord contacts, a lot of times the building engineer, the guy walking around with the keys that says Mel on his shirt and everything. The owner doesn't know, but he knows where the drawings are. He'll dig them up, they'll be dusty and everything, but they're very helpful. So a lot of times it's good to ask him.
Or the architect.
Or the architect, yes, they're architects. Granted, if it's a newer building, they're a lot easier to find. It's like, for instance, Joe had one where it's 10 years old or something like that, 5 years old, so just went to the actual architect that designed the building and got a copy there. So, anything more on that?
Rooftops, I think the best thing to do is call Mark or myself and have us go out there walking with you when we get to that point. So then you can have someone here saying, this is what would work best. And basically steer him where we want to be. For all lands, I passed out a survey, it says aerometric on there. This we just came across, the farmer was more than happy to put another tower on his property. What I didn't realize that most farms are divided up in separate properties. The farmhouse is on one lot for tax reasons.
Separate parcels.
Parcels.
Parcels, okay.
And then it's field on another. The issue we had there where we were going to put our compound had 2 problems. One, it crossed into both parcels, which you do not want to do. 2, American Tower didn't fence in their entire compound, so we're putting ours in their compound. So that's information like the parcel breaks you should have prior to the sidewalk.
Do you guys understand that? Basically, that's a situation where American Tower leased 100 by 100, but their fence, when you walk out to the field, there's a bunch of weeds, but the fence is only fencing in a little portion of it, but they have lease rights to a whole bunch. And if you're going to go in that area, you're trespassing on their property, on their lease rights. So even though there's no fence around it, that doesn't mean it's already taken. So you want to make sure you get that clear with the landlord. And you find out exactly where, or, how much is taken. And what was the situation? They were going over, there were two problems with that.
Two, one, we showed it covering American Tower parcel, a portion of it, and two, we were split on two parcels.
Yeah,
So after the site walk, we got waiting for the lease exhibit to come in. We got lucky here because the surveyor was in the area and staked it right away for us. And he came back and says, hey, you don't want to do this. So Verizon didn't see our mess up.
Right. Now, in that particular situation, you notice that the proposed area goes across the boundary line. It's owned by the same people, but it's held differently. One's held in a trust, and one's held by a couple. All of a sudden, you went from a one lease deal, now you got two leases because your lease area is covering up two properties. It's on a property. It's on a property line. So if they ever sold off one of the properties, it's just too much of a mess. You want to keep it all with one property owner, if possible. 99.9% of the time, they only want to go with one property owner for a raw land build and not split or straddle a property line. They always try to go on one.
You'll run into the same thing in the city. If you told the landlord, hey, we're going to put the antennas on the face of your building, what's below you? Is it the sidewalk or is it another building 2 floors down? We don't have the rights to do that. They could tear that building down and decide to go all the way up. So now our antennas are infringing on their property.
The air rights, basically.
Which we ran into at the Wrigley Field where
Oh,
we
yeah.
own both parcels, but he was willing to let us do it, but Verizon wouldn't do it.
Actually, one more thing I specified, I don't think we touched on this, is instead of just leasing your 60 by 60 area, you also have to acquire, there's easements that have to go along with it for power and telephone as well as access. So instead of being the area you're leasing, and it might even indicate, does it indicate on that survey or anything, or is that just lease area?
It shows the easement.
So that's one thing, when speaking to a landlord, I specified that you have to get access. There's going to be easements coming across their property for the power, basically at the walk. A lot of times the architect will, look and be able to decide, okay, we're going to get power from there, telephone based on what the closest box is, and it'll actually be an easement on there. So instead of these landlords actually just giving up their area, they're also going to have easements come across their property for power and telephone, and also access. Verizon has to be able to get to the site. Sometimes what they'll do is, well, most of the time they'll do, for all land site, they'll install a gravel road if there's not like an existing driveway or a parking lot to get to the site. It will be a 12-foot wide gravel road.
12-foot wide gravel road, and you'll have 8-foot for your power and telephone.
There you go.
They don't want the easement overlapping each other.
So it's 20 feet of easement they need? Are they exclusive easements?
No,
Non-exclusive easements.
non-exclusive easements. Again, but everything power, usually most of the time power and telephone typically goes underground. It's not always, it all depends because the local, again, I keep using Verizon specifically, they have a power and telephone person that works with SBC and ComEd on the power and telephone issues after we finalize our plans. Sometimes they come back to us, oh, we can't run it this easement. SBC said it has to come from over here. Sometimes we have to go back to a property owner and adjust the easement. We have to amend the lease to say, the easement's going over here. Joe just had this a couple times on a site up in Winthrop Harbor. And even at times, we can get more in detail, but a gas easement, they have backup generators at the site, and they use natural gas sometimes to get natural gas for their generators, which also require, from working with the gas company, to get an easement from the local gas line back to our site. Sometimes that requires an additional easement, or we can't utilize our existing easements. We require an additional easement with who was it? Nicor? Nicor over again. Again, Joe just had that as well, so he's become the guru on amending easements. So that's just for the two of you, obviously, since you're unfamiliar, but it's not just the little 60 by 60 area, it's these additional easements that go along with it.
Do we ever have to get 911 addresses for our clients?
Yes,
Yes.
usually Don Foss needs it to order power telco. What a lot of you may not know is a piece of property might have an address known as a common address. But the E911 address might be a little bit different, might be down the street a little bit. And so when you give them the common address and they order facilities, telco, they're going to the wrong place because your lease area is over here. So you file what's called E911 request form with the county or the city. Just fill out a simple form. Have you done that before, John?
Yeah.
What's it like? Tell us what it's like.
A trigger for it often is a generator because of the structure and the gas, and I guess there's fire potential. So it's a simple form, and mostly it's just waiting.
How long has it taken you before? Shortest and longest?
2 weeks.
Oh, you never got it over the counter?
No.
Who did you file it with?
Kankakee County.
And I think one of the most important things on the sidewalk is get a picture of the pedestal number or write down the pedestal number if you can, because that is key in trying to get some of these addresses, especially if you're out in the country. Because you can be sitting on a city jurisdiction line or the county, and if you can identify the pedestal number, usually the provider can find the site better for you.
Hey Susan, what's a pedestal?
It is the box where the telephone wires come to, and you'll see it's usually a raised box. I'm sure you've seen them.
It stands about
SBC
maybe
boxes.
3 to 4 feet tall, 4 or 6 inches square, painted green. The other thing with raw lands like this, in your zoning reviews, is there a curb cut? Is there already a driveway leaving the street to the highway to get into his field? The state typically doesn't like multiple cuts on a field. It's more of an argument and a long process to get approval. So you have to check into that, especially with the state highways.
Any other questions?
Do most of these sites require generators, or is that just?
Every site will get a generator if we can fit one. A, if it fits. B, if it's not a rooftop. And C, if the environmental allows it. Meaning, when they do a test and they find contamination nearby, they're not going to put a diesel generator because Verizon has deep pockets. And if they put a diesel generator in there, someone might sue and say, hey, Verizon's got a diesel, they leaked it. Well, no, it wasn't. Well, prove it wasn't. So then they're like, okay, we'll put propane. If you can't get propane, then they'll do a plug, meaning they'll do a pad where they can just drop a generator in. Then if they can't get the pad, meaning a little plug with a pad, then they'll waive it.
But that's getting harder.
It's getting harder.
Lewis
Yes.
said basically everything's got to have a generator for a dang good reason why
Right.
you're at this site.
When you present your lease for signature, you got the landlord's signature, you're all happy, it's like, well, where's the generator? And you're in a field, and you, oops, gotta go back, get that thing signed again. Make sure you try to get a generator, and if you can't get a generator, you need to have a reason why.
Is it part of the standard?
Part of
lease,
the
or-
standard shelter.
Yes.
The shelter has a generator room inside of it. Verizon standard shelter.
Yes.
But the landlord sometimes strike that out, or no?
No, I don't think I've ever had an occasion where a landlord said no backup generator.
Yeah, if they're concealed inside the shelter, it's usually
Right.
not.
Yeah, it's inside.
It's usually, it's not specified in our lease anywhere, I don't think, about the generator. But when we show them, like when we finalize drawings, we want to get landlord approved drawings before we apply for permits. That will show the generator room in there. They can ask, it's obviously, the big thing obviously when that power outage happened 2 years ago out east, that's when Verizon got real generator happy that everything's got to have a backup generator. So that's targeted. But the landlord bring it up, you say it's a backup generator. You usually know if it's diesel fuel or natural gas fuel going in there, but just explain, hey, it's in our shelter, it's ventilated and everything. It's a requirement that we need. We haven't really had any issues with any landlords saying no generator. So, anything else to our permitting guru comes up? Ready for your close-up?
Joe, can you share it?
Sure.
But again, in doing the sites, like John, I think I want to go with you first to look at the Gulf of 59 and El Jarilo
Hey,
site.
you can sit down.
So we'll draw that together, give you a better feel of what we're looking for.
Okay, like, well, first of all, as JT said, the zoning analysis might be included in the blue book. There is a template for this zoning analysis, and they're on the server, and I've included one. It's the one that says Village of Blue Island Zoning Analysis at the top. They're sometimes much thicker than this. This is one that, it's a co-location. There was a zoning analysis write-up done, just because I think there were a couple different options that they had, but basically, this just kind of spells out the process, where the location of the tower is, and then it's got a building permit attached, an electrical permit attached, and a contractor's list attached. That is basically all the information you're going to need. First thing with the contractors is contractors have to be registered in those places. So when you go in for permitting, you have to find out, will my contractors need to get permitted because they have to get bonds, or they have to get different information to the village, checks, all that stuff. But the biggest thing is to verify that you're in the right jurisdiction. John and I spent a day in Lake County because we thought a tower was in Lake County, and they had annexed it 3 months before, and it wasn't in their books yet. It really belonged to the village of Buffalo Grove, so then we had to start the process all over again.
How many weeks did we lose on that site?
Several, because they're planning on tearing the tower down now, so, anyway.
So how do you verify that up front, that you're in the right jurisdiction?
Well, we called Lake County, but they hadn't,
They're looking at old maps.
Yeah.
they're
The
like,
mapping division had not yet sent them the correct,
so when you're calling Lake County, you need to ask for the mapping division,
kind of worst case scenario.
because they have it all in paperwork, but they haven't released a new zoning ordinance yet.
County or whatever local jurisdiction, like the Village of Buffalo Grove.
Right,
Typically at zoning maps, which is part of our thing, we usually verifies exactly what jurisdiction you're in and the exact zoning classification of it.
so when you call to verify the jurisdiction, ask them if there's a checklist, what you're gonna need before you go in, because if you're gonna need 2 sets of drawings compared to 12 sets of drawings, it's a huge cost difference. 12 sets of drawings and you go in, you only need 1. You've got 11 sets of drawings sitting around the office, like, someone took their time to stamp each page and sign each page, and now it's waste. So you also need to know, like, if there are any fees due up front, because you go to the jurisdiction to give them the drawings and apply for a building permit, and they say, well, you're gonna need a $200 check. Well, unless you want to write a $200 personal check, it'd be nice to know that you have fees due up front, so you don't have to make 2 trips all the way out to Buffalo Grove or wherever. Some places, you might need a copy of the lease. You need to know, like, all the things that you need to bring ahead of time and how many copies you need of them. Most places have these checklists online, or they can fax you a copy of it. The only thing is they're very inconsistent. In one place, you're going to get a nice little old lady who is like, oh, okay, I'll have him review these, and you'll get a permit tomorrow. And then you leave, and then you go to the next jurisdiction, and they're like, I don't care what you're doing, if it has to do anything with the cell phone tower, you're going through zoning. I mean, they're very different places, depending on what they're, if it's a residential, mostly industrial type of place, it's going to vary a lot. It's going to be very inconsistent. So you kind of need to there'll be a different feel each time you go. Just be prepared for it. And grab a business card. The little old lady who told you the permit would be ready tomorrow, get her name. Just so tomorrow when you call back and say, is my permit ready? How much does it cost? They're like, I'm sorry, who did you see yesterday? Who did you talk to? Just make sure you always have a contact with the building department, so that if they do have any questions, they're not waiting for your call back. So they can call you and you can call them. Any questions on suburban sites? They're pretty typical.
And one of the big things on the suburban sites in the counties, the lady at the counter has got a lot of control of what's going on there. Be friendly, make small talk with her, when you call her, ask her how her day is. Gurney's a prime example. Our site went through and it just stopped. I went in to drop off another permit to start talking. She goes, oh yeah, it's a talk of what's going on here. It's just sitting on someone's list because they don't want you to build it. So they're the ones that's going to tell you what's going on. And if she's friends with you, she's going to tell you everything. And I mean, this lady gave us enough information to know we had to get the lawyers involved to push it, because it wasn't going anywhere.
And, I mean, sometimes you'll walk in there and you'll say, I'd like to file for a building permit, and they say, what is this for? You say, I'd like to co-locate on a cell phone tower, and it's out on frontage road. And they'll say, oh, we hate that cell phone tower, and they just kind of take it. You know, you might need to say, well, it's already there, we're just adding some little antennas at the top, you know, make it sound as good as you can. They're not gonna be the ones reviewing the drawings, they're gonna give it to their boss, or whoever, the planner or whatever. But as for other places besides suburbs, there's the city of Chicago. And that's a very long process and very detailed. Part of your packet is a permit application, and that's attached to a checklist for project submittal. You need to go through this checklist and make sure that you have everything on these 11 pages. You have to apply about a month in advance for a meeting. You have to fax in an application to say, I just want to meet with you.
For the city of Chicago specifically.
For the city of Chicago. You have to fill out an application, fax it to them. They'll send you an email and call you and say, okay, you have a meeting 9:30 this morning with project manager 4. Be there, and if you're not, it's $200 if you don't show up, or you need 48 hours to cancel. So most of the time, I would schedule the meeting when Wayne knows he's getting the drawings in a couple weeks. So then you'll know you'll have everything together. There's also, for wireless telecommunication facilities in the zoning ordinance, there is, you have to get approval from the alderman. It used to just be alderman notification, and they haven't really changed the zoning ordinance. It's kind of different with which project manager you're going to be with, but you need to send the alderman a letter saying we want to do this 10 days in advance. Make sure that you get a copy of her signature on the FedEx.com, and then if you need to meet with her, if she's like, oh, this is great, I'll fax you over an approval letter tomorrow, that's fine. You might have to go to open ward night and meet with them. Sean and I have done that up in Evanston, when we met with them, and we sat there and he said, yeah, I have Verizon, I'd like better service, I'll sign up on whatever. And then, you know, you have to go with some aldermen. They say, I want to see a photo simulation of what this is going to look like when it's built. So then you have to go back next Monday night with photo simulations. Or they might say, I want the antennas painted blue, so they blend in with the sky. You just kind of have to go in with these meetings and talk with the aldermen until you get approval, because they have the final say. They can put your permit on hold for a very long time. So you have to have alderman notification and approval. A completed application, and make sure everything you do at the city of Chicago is always in black ink and there's no whiteout on it.
Can't be blue ink, it's gotta be black ink.
I got kicked out for signing my name in blue ink on the application. You should always bring a copy of the lease just in case they have a problem with you saying you're signing your name as the tenant. Because most of the time, I sign my name, Lindsay Robinson, as agent for Verizon Wireless or Crown Castle or Singular on the applications. If they want proof that you're a tenant, then you might need to bring a copy of the lease. Anyway, so you go to this meeting that you have set up with this project manager, and you sit there for about an hour, and they look through all the stuff, make sure you have everything you need, your structural calcs, everything's in order.